This is an interview with Rosario Catalano, Comfort Inn, Brooklyn, New York. It's the 21st of March, 2003, approximately 7:40 a.m. The interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you tell me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
I'm referred to as Bob, but the name is Rosario. I use my father's middle initial for N for Nicholas Catalano. May 14th, 1924 is the date of birth.
Mm-hmm. And where were you born?
Oh, I was born in New York City, down in the village.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Prior to entering military service, what was your educational background?
I was supposed to graduate high school. I did graduate. My mother had to go up and get the diploma because I wouldn't take the student deferment that they were giving out, 6-month deferments at that time. My father said, you don't know how to kill yourself next, so I rushed right out. And because they were drafting me anyway. And I didn't actually volunteer, but by not taking the deferment, in effect, it came out the same thing. I was scooped right up.
Do you remember where you were and what your reaction was when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I had come out of the movie house. The Loge Plaza in Corona. And it was kind of a shock, and you didn't understand why it was a shock. Everybody was talking as you went through the streets. And I guess, no, in retrospect, looking at it, you didn't really take it very serious. You was home, you was secure, you know, you just didn't, it's not going to affect me, never even entered your mind that it might affect you. So that's about it. I think we were more interested in the movies that we had spent 11 cents to get into the movie house at that time.
You were still in high school?
Yeah.
So you ended up in the Army. Did you pick the Airborne, or?
Well, no, I didn't know enough about that you could have any freedom to select. I was in the service a while, and I went to, what the hell did they go? ASTP, Army Specialized Training Program. Yeah, that's what that was. And I stayed there for a while, and then I think they were dissolving the program. I was up in Ripon, Wisconsin, and a fellow that I had buddied with, he was with a big scar on his neck. He was at Pearl Harbor, and he said, we can select the paratroopers because they're going to assign us to an engineering or an infantry outfit. So I said, I would go. Paratrooper sounded nice. And it was more for the extra $50 and the jump boots. You know, at 18, you're misguided. And I went to Fort Bragg, and they had, it was a 4-week program. And the 4th week, you made the jumps, the 3 weeks with the vigorous training. It seems like they had all the time in the world just to donate you to expand your lungs and run around the airport before breakfast and things like that. And if you any infractions, you were doing push-ups, so give me 20, drop down and give me 10, you know. And the 4th week, there was 4-day jumps and 1 night jump. They always used to tell you on a night jump, be very careful. What looks like water when it's shiny, that you slip out of the harness, dive in, and be very careful because the class before you, a guy mistook the highway for water. I think they always gave out that same story, but that's one thing that stuck in my mind. It's possible. But I failed on the 3rd jump. I failed to get up because I had twisted my ankle. And by way of qualifying, you had to say that you never broke any bones, wrist, legs. and arms, and so naturally, if you want to get in, you lie a little, you know. It's and I had on record that I hadn't had any broken bones, and when they throw you in a truck there and take you down to the doctors, and they X-rayed the ankle, and like any American boy, everybody had a broken arm or leg. I had a broken ankle at one time, and it showed up on the X-rays, and he turned around to me and he says, "Son, you have to be disqualified." So I said, "Gee, I wanted to be in the Airborne." He says, "Well, I'll send you to the glider division." So that's how I went to Paxton Air Base in North Carolina. And they took you up in a glider. If you didn't get sick, they landed on the nice smooth runway, and you were qualified for the Airborne, the glider division.
How many glider rides did you take?
Just that one, and then
One.
instead of jumping into the invasion, they assigned me to a glider. Not just me, just the company. And so actually there was no runway there when you landed in France. And it actually just crashed. They finally stopped when we hit a wall. And the pilot and the co-pilot were up front. I happened to be next to them. And they didn't move. I'm pretty sure they died. And everything come flying forward, the laws of physics, you know, inertia. And something hit me in the lip, but I was too afraid to stop and examine anything, and because you have to get out fast. One mortar shell will take out everybody. That was the thing. Move. And one lieutenant came along. He says, "Loan me the shovel when you're done, Catalano. How bad are you hurt?" "I'm not hurt. I was digging away." And nothing like fear to motivate you to move fast. So that something had hit my lip. When your lip bleeds, your shirt was a mess. And well, that was the adventure of landing in a glider.
So after you trained in North Carolina, where did you go
I
from
went
there?
to Paxton Air Base,
Oh, yeah.
and from there we had infantry training, actually, which is what you are is when you come out of the sky. I mean, you're on the ground, and we happen to be especially light infantry. We didn't have a real heavy. No, we didn't have heavy equipment. It was a mobile unit. It was the 550th, and as I say, once you're on the ground, you're infantry, and we stayed there, and then we shipped out of Virginia. Anyway, James Whitcomb Riley, a Liberty ship, with 550 men and officers in our outfit. That's how they derived the name, and they tried to keep that number up. But we landed in Oran, Africa. It took about 21 days.
Did you go across in a convoy or a single ship?
No, in a convoy.
Convoy, okay.
And they zigzagged. In 21 days, I think you could float a balloon, of course, that faster. But we landed in Oran, Africa, but there was no action. It was Africa was ours at that time. I can't even remember the date, but no, I don't remember the dates. But then from there, they had the invasion of Sicily, and we were like just support. I mean, we weren't really doing anything. But I know that a few of us, I know a fellow named Gallardo, he heard about the volunteering for the paratroopers. No questions asked, so I went. And I made I don't know how many weeks, it was a shortened course, which had already been built up physically as much as you were going to be. And we qualified, Gallardo qualified also. And that's about it. And then from there we went over to Italy. And we're more...
Did you see any fighting on Sicily, or?
No, not really. not even a mop-up group. I mean, it's just. But in Italy, we sporadically had contact with Germans. Germans would hold a position for a while, then move. And I remember Italy as mud. There was a lot of rain. They used to, the people, the citizens there, they used to say it's because of the guns firing. That's why all the clouds come and it rains. I don't know if the Indians used to believe that. But I remember they had a lot of wine and things like that, but mud comes out of my mouth.
Did you speak Italian at all?
My speaking Italian is broken Italian. I think if you hear somebody come from another country, they speak broken English. So I know words. I know more now, but at that time I could read. If somebody was talking and they mentioned in a dialect that my grandfather had, then I would understand it. If grandfather was from Naples, but since that time I've married a woman that was from Sicily. She was born there, but she came over at 2 years old, and her family conversed in the language, so I picked up a lot of the language since then, but mostly Sicilian now. We went up there. We were pulled off the line. It's more than a few days. Because August 15th was the invasion in southern France. I went in on that, on the glider. And it was very difficult for that pilot, because the Germans weren't stupid. I mean, they couldn't cover all the ground that they anticipated the troops would come in. They would put up poles in the fields, and they put a mine underneath it, so that when the gliders came in, if the wing happened to hit that pole, knock it over, the mine would go off. And these poor fellas, the pilot and the co-pilot, were trying to get themselves in a position on this field that they could land, but most of them were interrupted by brick fences that the Europeans had constructed for centuries, and the moss and the age just made them as strong as cement. And they would lift over as best they could a couple of times, and then the one time it just couldn't, and hit this stone wall. These gliders are made of like a lawn chair, with aluminum and just wrapping, and they had a plywood for the floor.
Now, were you in an American glider or an English?
Yeah, it was an American glider, yeah. And I saw pictures of the British gliders too. I mean, they didn't fare much better either. This one just, well, it broke after the impact, but you know, that's we landed in vineyards. That's August. They were just about right. I remember reaching up and getting a grape or something like that.
Was there opposition firing at your glider?
Yeah,
and
there
so on
was.
as you were coming in?
You could hear it, and you could hear the mortars going off, and yeah, there was opposition. But they had a defense for such a large area. It wasn't concentrated. But I suppose if you got up and walked around, you'd be a good target. But we were after.
What was inside your glider?
A bench. Just
It was just a troop carrier? Did you have any other?
Yeah, no, that's all.
How many men were in there?
Yeah, you know, they've asked that about 25, 27 or something like that. And there was equipment in there, but as I say, it wasn't a Jeep or anything like that. It was just extra. I don't know. I really don't know. I happened to be sitting next to the guy, the pilot and the co-pilot, and I had never gone in on an invasion before, so I was really concerned. But something flew. I suppose it was a helmet or something that whacked me in that lip there. Well, I don't know if you ever cut your lip, but when that, boy, there's no stopping it. And at that time, you just, I didn't realize it because I suppose you're paralyzed with fear is the best way. I hate to say that, you know, especially on the tape. So we were after a town called Lemoy, Lemuy, and the fact is, I have, I don't know, one or two of the fellows were active in. They've been back there a number of times, and they were treated royally by the French people at that time, anyway. And they put up a plaque in the town square, and I have a picture of it at home. They made copies and they sent it to all the fellows. 550th has met each year for 52 years, I think it is. And one fellow, Al Roja, has gone to every meeting. Wow. And there's another fellow running neck and neck with him. He's just missed one meeting. So when those two are there, the contest is still going for the following year. But if you want to have them in New York, you become the president, and you make arrangements. They met in New York for a number of years before I realized they were doing that. And when they were coming to New York was in the early 50s, and it was very reasonable, but now they can't afford New York. So we go to the little towns. We've been to Chicago, you know, Cincinnati. As I say, I've been in Kentucky, a little small town, and the rates are better, and there's a lot of things to see. So we've gone a number of places repeatedly, but the fact that we're still meeting, and you can see, as my wife says, the lean, mean fighting machine is getting kind of corpulent.
How long were you in combat in southern France?
I guess it was months. We went into the foothills of the Alps, I guess, where they have Barcelona and little small towns where the Germans said, well, they dig in those little small towns, especially if they're in a town that has a steeple. You know, that's their favorite place. They always have a good shot up there. A friend of mine named Bill Lees, we had to get across a courtyard. It's like that. The town just faces everything into the center. The animals live downstairs in some of these places, and the people live upstairs. And it's that cement houses, mortar or whatever. And every little town has a fountain or a trough or something for the animals. And you have to get across that, what could it be, 75 feet, 50, 60 feet. And this one particular time, we had to get across. A couple of guys made it, some guys didn't. They were laying out there. And this fellow, Bill Lees, went across, and you have to stop at that fountain because it's too much of a journey across the courtyard. And he dived down. It was that would be snow there, and when he went to get up, he couldn't get up. And he started analyzing. The way he tells it is very good. You see my legs? I can feel my legs. And he started assessing your parts of your body. Why am I not getting? What's holding me down? And to make a long story short, every time he tried to move, this guy up in the tower was whacking at him, you know. And what it was, he had dove down, and there was barbed wire down under the snow, and his gun belt and everything else had just didn't pierce his body, but it was just so they didn't let him free. I mean, it sounds funny, you know, even when he tells it, but at that time you can imagine the kind of panic you're in, somebody shooting at you. At the same time, you have you got your own problems, so. because he wasn't as fast as I was, I ran fail fast. The more fright that's in there, the speedier you get. Because I told my grandson, if I could, because he came in, he was, I think, 17 at the time, or yeah, 18. And we live on the beach, and there's big handball courts there. And he's up there, and he had beat some guy who was, if you win, you can stay on the court. So, you know, this guy had been on the court for a couple of games. So George played him, and he beat this guy. He says, Grandpa, you should have seen me. I was fast. I was over here. I was there. He says, was I fast or was I don't, George, you don't know what fast is. I says, one time when I was running and doing a battle, I says, a bullet came alongside of me, and I just steered it away. So he looked at me, we didn't know for sure. And then he said, Grandpa. And incidentally, that didn't happen. I was fast when I was afraid, but
Now, this was during the winter that?
yeah, that was
Did you have winter gear?
No. That was the reason we ended up getting captured. I understand that winter gear was going to be issued not only to us, to our outfit, but, well, it's rumor had it that the war will be over before it was before the breakthrough that the Germans made. We figured before General Bradley and those guys, I figured the war will be over, and there's no use of issuing gear because they were going to concentrate on the summer gear if you went over to Japan, whatever their thinking was. But we didn't have any winter gear, and the Germans had winter gear. You know, when I got captured, they took my gloves right away, my boots. So that left me with a pair of snowpacks or galoshes or whatever they call them then, and no gloves.
So how, were you in Bastogne itself, or were you?
No, we were, we had been shipped to England. And we were at an airport waiting for the fog to lift. Waited, I don't know how many days. It was Christmas. We spent there. But I get memory lapses. But we were trucked into the area, where Bastogne is, into a town where we were captured at Raymond in Belgium. And we were trying to break through to relieve the 101st that was in there.
So were you in England on kind of a rest and recuperation, or?
Well, I suppose that's what it was. Rumor, everything is rumor that we were going to be shipped to the States to go to the South Pacific.
Oh, okay.
And of course, that's about the time that when the Germans broke through in early December, they mounted the big offensive through the Ardennes, the same route that the World War I, I suppose, had taken. So that put a crimp in the plans of whatever the higher-ups had planned to do.
Now, how did you get from England into the continent?
We went on truck. Gee, I don't know. I don't remember. But I know that we had a long truck ride after that. Because we were over by the English side of France, and you had to get across France into Belgium. And that was cold. And, some areas had cold, and some areas snow, and some areas didn't.
So you just had field jackets then?
Yeah, you had overcoats.
Oh, you had your overcoats.
Yeah, you had the overcoat, that brown overcoat, which is very, very obvious on snow.
Yes, yeah.
And it was cold. It was a cold ride. And
now, what kind of weapon did you carry?
I had a bazooka, and of course my rifle. And I had a German Luger at the time. No, when I got captured, I had a German Luger. But the issue was the rifle and the bazooka and the ammunition. A fella, Ted Renicki from Toledo, Ohio. He got wounded that day, because we got captured at night on January 4th, and he got hit in the hand. And like a good buddy there, I said, well, take the glove off, you know. And it started spurting. We put the glove back on and put the sulfur back around the hand itself with the glove. And I said, he says, I'm going to go. I said, yeah, it's a battalion is down that way. He's Battalion 8. And as far as I know, he was one of the few, not the only one of the few guys to get out before we were surrounded, because towards evening, well, we were surrounded by that. We didn't realize it. The Germans had we had pushed ahead too far, or the flanks didn't move up with us. No matter how you look at it, we were stuck out there just like one finger and appendage. The rest of them had. But the thing was, he was the last that I had association with. In fact, the bazooka was destroyed because it got hit, got a hole through the thing. So that was I think we only had about 2 shells left anyway. So that's, and I never found them, and we buddied up for so long, and went to Cincinnati for a reunion and looked at a book, but there's so many Renickis, Ted Renicki, maybe he might be up in Albany, but I don't know where I was.
Well, the night that you were captured, you want to tell us about that?
Oh.
I know you said your unit became kind of stuck out and surrounded.
Yeah. Oh, it was B Company. Captain Paxton was, he just died a few years ago. And by this time, I don't think we had too many lieutenants left. I think Captain Paxton was right up with us. And he was moving around to different groups. We had taken the town, we lost it, it got pushed back, and then we took the town again. By this time, that town was on fire. And if you stand up in front of you're a silhouette, so you had to stay low, and there's snow on the ground, and it's frozen for a couple of months already, and you couldn't really dig in to make a position for yourself. There was some used foxholes, and artillery shells hit, they'd make a concave something or other for you to jump into. But after we took the town the second time, now it's dusk. There was no sunset or anything. The weather was bad. It was very cold. And it's, you didn't realize it, but your feet are frozen, but not to the point that you can't walk. They're just so cold. And you huddled together where it was feasible. And then other times you had to move. I understand that Captain Paxton was with a group that 3 or 4 guys that they had to, just running out of ammunition, they had to get out of there. The point was, different guys had different experiences. I know that Pratt was trapped up in a building that was isolated from the rest of the town, and I don't know how he had it, but he had an enormous amount of shells. He had ammunition, and he was playing hell with the Germans. They couldn't get past that strategic spot that house was in, and he was up there, and this fellow used to supply food for himself in West Virginia with no address. He lived in the mountains. they hit the squirrel in the eye type of thing. And they finally had to bring a tank up to take the building out, to get him out of there. And he got hurt, and the Germans put him in a German hospital, I understand. It's only hearsay. But I spoke to one of his sons a couple of years ago. He never came to reunions because it was a type of scratch-the-land existence, you know. Economically, he couldn't afford that. So that he never spoke to his children about that, but he did a tremendous job over there, because everybody, the word went around, you know, Pratt was over there. And he could cook a chicken in mud. They used to call it mud chicken. He would dig a hole and take a chicken, the head is off, the feathers are on. And it wasn't cleaned out or anything like that. Put it in there, cover it with dirt, and then build a fire on top of it, and everybody would cook potatoes or something like that. This is August or September after the invasion. And when the potatoes were done, everybody had a stick or something like that, because we went through farms that had potatoes that were growing, you know, they'd been blown up. So that he'd kick that fire over and dig out that chicken, and he'd have it there, and he'd whack at it, and the feathers and skin would just come right off that thing. And so I mentioned it to the son on the phone. He says, "Oh," he says, "we still do that." And so I liked Patty. He was a big, tall guy. He was about 6'3", 6'4". And it's amazing he didn't get his head chopped off if he was so tall, you know. I think the short guys had an advantage because you didn't have to dig so deep. But help me, I don't know where I am.
Well, your unit was being surrounded.
Oh yeah, what it was, now it's nighttime, just about nighttime. I got caught at about 11 o'clock, January 4th, and you could hear the rumbling of the vehicles around us. But what we didn't know was that they were dropping off German soldiers, but they were dressed in white. They had the white parkas. They were equipped for this kind of weather. And naturally, you can't see. When you talk dark, we're talking dark. Other than that fire that's going on back there when you didn't dare stand up, they were dropping men off around. I don't know how many at a time or one at a time. But we found ourselves manually, the men just, it wasn't just machinery, you know. So that it got to the point that I know a couple of guys, Captain Paxton came down and said that the situation is hopeless. He says, I've been ordered to break off radio communication, destroy the radio, and I'm going to surrender. He says, I think it's the best thing. I mean, look at, he's got information I don't have. I mean, he went, we all went. I mean, a couple of guys decided that break out, make it on their own, but they were cut down. I didn't hear of anybody that got out of there. So that it was about 11 o'clock at night. It was January 4th. We had called for tank support, according to what I hear, and we asked for artillery support, and they couldn't give it to us for whatever reason they gave. And so we gave up, and they searched us. In fact, the Army overcoat, I don't know if you're familiar with an Army overcoat, has a pocket about that long, about 16 inches at least deep. And you accumulate things. So you have to get rid of them if you have any German souvenirs or something like that, because you had to kill somebody to get, that's the German reasoning. So I was making sure now and I find at the bottom of my right hand pocket, all the way down at the bottom, there's a hand grenade. you know, you can't be like the movies, you know, subsequent movies years later. And I managed to get that grenade out, and I dug a little hole and put it in there. And, you know, what are you going to say? One grenade is going to change the whole picture, you know. The only picture will change is your head. And they searched you, and I know the guy took my gloves, and they asked for the wounded to fall out. So I dropped out, because I had gotten hit on the heel of my shoe by a piece of shrapnel. And the area is slice an apple, and it's a clean slice, and it just nicked the foot flesh. So I fell out. I figured somebody put a bandage on it anyway. And he says, pretty good English. I mean, he says, take off the boot. So I took off the boot, and I showed him. And he says, all right. He says, take off the other boot. I don't know. That's just my right foot. I said, not the other shoe. He said, no, I want the boots. I had a pair of jump boots. And he gave me a pair of galoshes or snowpacks or something. And they were kind of big. And he left it untreated. I mean, it wasn't pouring blood or anything out that bad. But to digress a minute, as a kid, I used to get boils on your arm. And I had a grandmother, an Italian grandmother, that used to take the leaves, we call them dandelions, but they're not really, it's a weed. They have a big broad leaf, and she used to put it with a piece of Kirkman or Octagon soap, with brown soap. She used to put that there and then put that leaf on there and wrap it up with a piece of rag. So, I mean, I couldn't get soap or anything like that, but I saw the leaves. You scrounge around in the snow, you find a leaf, and I put it on there, and I wrapped it with a sock. And I told that to a doctor one time. He says, that's very clever. He says, the Indians used to use leaves and things like that. He says, so that I had used that, and it healed up fine. It's just a little small scar. But in the meantime, the boots were too big, and they would go up and down, so you got big blood blisters and things like that. But
did they give you any gloves to replace yours?
No, I was working with I wanted to get back. The artillery support came, and we had already surrendered, and the Germans were taking us back across this big open field, and our artillery opened up, and we were caught right in the middle of that field. And naturally, I mean, the Germans went down too, and I hit the ground one time, and I thought that the ground was going away from me, but what it was is you had been picked up from the concussion and dropped down, and I guess I must have went up 24 inches or 2 foot at least, and dropped him down again. I remember that specifically. The artillery was late. I don't think anybody got hurt, that I remember. And they brought us to a barn, maybe about a mile back, I suppose, I don't know. And the thing was, they gave us soup, onion soup. I remember that with a piece of bread. And that was great. I mean, you know, you didn't feel the pinch of being hungry, you know. We never have hot soup brought up on the line. And that was the best part of it. But then later on, it was a steady starvation diet. And I don't know how it happened. I guess the luck of the draw or whatever it is. I got put into a labor force, a labor battalion. Not necessarily the size of a battalion.
So you were separated from the others? Was anyone else separated with you?
Yeah. My best buddy, Frank Parovich, he lives in Chicago. We're in constant touch. We see each other all the time. And he and I and a number of the others. But somehow or other, now this is a 200-300 guys. You have to visualize, maybe you got some sergeant or lieutenant in charge, German officer, and somebody comes over that outranks him or has a need. I need 25 men. And they take 25. You never see the 25 again because wherever they went, they went. So that constant taking, I ended up alone. Frank ended up in, I forget the prison camp, but he was in a prison camp, and the rest of them were all in prison camps. I seemed like the Lone Ranger out there. And the hardest that I ever worked, other than walking everywhere, although I did get shoved into a freight car, a 40 and 8 cars, and the way you went in, that's the way you stayed. I mean, they overpacked you. And you'd stay in there sometimes 2-3 days. Sometimes American planes would spot the train, and they don't know that you're in there. They would have strafing. And then there's a need for bathroom facilities. Everybody by that time has had diarrhea. And you in this boxcar, there's one bucket which would slop back and forth because it was always, so the floor was, the straw absorbed this so much and that's all. And they didn't feed you, they didn't open the door. Even when they pulled over on the siding where, I suppose a supply train or troop train or something had to pass, and you'd stay there for 6 or 8 hours, and then another train, and then you would, when the track was cleared, in retrospect you know what's going on, you know. So that now they have these guys, you're working, you're not eating, and I ended up at 92 pounds.
Now, who was in the camp with you?
I didn't get in the camp now.
Oh.
I was in this labor group.
Just a labor. Who was in the labor group? Were you were the
my
only
outfit,
American soldier, or?
Oh yeah, all Americans.
All
yeah.
Americans.
Oh yeah, all Americans. But for my outfit, there was nobody left. I remember a plane strafed the column that one time when we were walking, and there was a guy named Lamontina. He was the last of the guys of the 550th, and he said, well, we were close together, and the plane came down to strafe the road, and everybody just went, you know, you didn't have to be ordered to save yourself. Some guys went down, and some guys went up, including me, into this pine wooded area. I don't want to say forest, but there was a lot of pine trees. So this American pilot, whoever he is, he don't know, and he took one bomb that he had, and he dropped it into the forest, and he made those trees like toothpicks just flying around, and Lamontina got a 5 or 6 inch piece, pretty thick, right through his hand. So then he got put into a truck, and he was, I don't know whatever happened to him, but he was going to be taken to a hospital or a doctor. So that was now I'm all alone, but it doesn't make any difference. We're all in the same boat, so we're friends, you know, all Americans. But I worked the hardest at Limburg, Germany. They had it was a minor railroad center, you know, I don't say it's a major. They had to keep one track open. They got a lot of help. And they had a guy, the American had a man that would come in at about 5 or 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock before it got too dark, and he'd see the condition of the track that we'd try to keep open. And he'd drop one bomb and just make a hole, and there goes the work he had done. They would take a group of 200-300 guys or whatever, and somebody would go with one group and bring them over to a wooded area where they had track stored, and the other group would go to the left, another wooded area where they had the ties, railroad ties, and the remainder of the group fell in the hole, all under the supervision of somebody who knew what he was doing. You talk about gloves, I got signed, only one time it happened, to the track, and I have no gloves, and it's cold, and metal is cold. You know the business about sticking your tongue. So I carried the track, and they said, okay, let's drop it. Dropped it. And the skin come right off my hand, but it didn't bleed because your hand was practically frozen between carrying it and the element outside. And you work at that sometimes 10 hours, 8-10 hours. And the barn you slept in where they gave out the soup, well, maybe tomorrow you might be there, so you missed another day. You ate snow in the meantime. And you just, working in the fields, sometimes you would find rotten turnips that the farmers had no use for, or they used to store the vegetables in the ground.
Root cellar.
Yeah, and they would have the turnips, which were hardier, at the top. So the sun would come out and melt that over there, and then it would freeze again. So the turnips on top, that you managed to sit down near, you know, when they gave you a rest, get a turnip, frozen turnips, rotten turnips, and that was a treat that you had to eat. Otherwise, like I say, you ate snow.
So you were never put in a camp, you were just constantly moving
That's it.
as a work detail.
Sometimes a truck would be stuck, and the guy would take 30, 40 guys got over to push. And you know, whatever jobs they were encountered came along. I mean, there's a lot of trucks were stuck, cars were stuck, and manpower was a big thing.
How much do you think you weighed when you went into captivity?
Oh, I was about 175, 180, boy, solid muscle, young muscle, you know.
And you dropped to 90?
92 pounds.
Now, were a lot of the men with you Jewish or
No, they were
mixed?
they were all mixed. Milton Bartle was Jewish. I think he's still living in Florida. That's the last I heard of him. There was Stern. There were a number of Jewish fellas, but Stern wasn't captured. No, that's right. Bartle was captured. But no, we didn't. There was no. I don't think there was any of the what do you call it, Semitism?
Anti-Semitism.
Yeah, and there was no. They didn't go around checking your dog tags to see if you, which I didn't have. I had left them in Orient, Africa on a nail when I took a shower. So I could have been an unknown soldier out there.
Were any of the prisoners beaten or mistreated?
I was mistreated. I slept on a shelf. After a while you get smart for self-preservation, you know, not to screw your brother or anything. Now, you come in off this detail, and if you plop down in this, it was a warehouse, if you plop down on the floor in front, because everybody was on floors, you know, I mean, you'd have to crawl over everybody. And so you plop down on the floor, and then during the night, if some guy wanted 50 guys or 25 guys, they open the door, rouse, rouse, and you just came in. And you'd be out again. So one time I climbed over everybody. I got up on a shelf. There was a shelf in this warehouse. Oh, I don't know. I got into it. So I slept there. Now you got to understand, I'm cold, and I'm sleeping. I got up, and the next morning I didn't get out faster. Rouse, rouse, and he whacked me with that rifle butt. Caught me right on the bottom of the spine. Man, that hurt. I never forgot that. But I survived that, but I think it was so cold that I couldn't hardly really appreciate the bruise that it gave me. But the walking from place to place, you know, now I got this overcoat on, and it's a funny thing. Overcoat is warm, and yet it's not warm because now it's accumulated rain and snow melted in and the dirt. And I couldn't walk with it anymore. And in fact, this was right towards the end. And I took it off, and I thought I'd be able to throw it at least 3 or 4 feet. I barely made the ditch. I thought I'd get it up on an embankment. I can still see that embankment. But then I went a little ways more, and I collapsed. Now what we have is a wagon, one of these big vegetable wagons, a flat piece with 2 big wheels, if you can imagine that. And we had picked that up, I would say the group, and anybody that collapsed, they put them on there. And because if you didn't, there was a German in the back of the line, and anybody that feigned or otherwise, they would shoot them. So we got this wagon. They saw the wagon, and they had permission, I suppose, just to take the wagon for that reason alone. And they picked me up and they put me on that wagon. In retrospect, I know what happened. Then I remember somebody saying, his eyes are fluttering, "Okay, buddy, come on, get up, we got somebody else to put on there." So in effect, somebody saved my life because I just went as far as I could, and the next thing I know, I don't know, I found myself on that push cart. And but otherwise, you know, they couldn't take any more prisoners and just have a truck to treat you nice, you know. So and then that's when I was put into a 9B in Bad Orb, and I stayed there for maybe 5, 6 days, and then because you could see at nighttime the lines were getting closer, the Americans were coming, or somebody was coming. And who did come was the American tanks. I don't know what outfit it was or anything like that, but we had woke up in the morning and somebody said the guards are gone. And a lot of the guards had one arm. They were, you know, I suppose they didn't get discharged. You know, they became part of the home front. They take care of the prisoners or whatever maintenance had to be done to keep the civilians in line or whatever. But they were gone. They had jumped on bicycles, I understand. I didn't see. And they took off out the back gate. The front gate was locked, but that didn't bother the tank. I mean, the tank just didn't even come out and check or nothing. Just rolled right over them. And
Do you know what unit liberated you?
I don't really know. It was one of Patton's. I suppose they break off into the groups, but the tank that came through, whoever it was, had cans of sea rations. They must have encountered other prison camps and saw how these guys were not fed. And we scrambled, well, everybody did. I scrambled like an animal just to get a can because they threw it off there as they went right through there. And of course, they were on the attack, I suppose, you know, they're not going to stop. And there were other troops behind. But I got this can, and I had made a wooden spoon. That's another story. I traded a slice of bread for that spoon, which is a hard thing when you have it. But I found myself that I was wolfing a piece of bread down, you know, you take one bite, but you take two before you get your hand away. So I figured if I could get a knife, I could cut little small pieces. And I traded that with some, I think they were Polish, but anyway, one of those guys, they were also captured, but they were on the other side of a fence. And I traded the knife for the bread. And so with that I made a spoon, and with the spoon I took about 2 mouthfuls of that sea ration, and the whistle went right down and came right up again. And I remember vomiting, regurgitating, just to the point where I couldn't get up. I was down on the floor, just weak. From just that, mother's milk was the expression or something like that. And when the follow-up groups came, there were a couple of us there. I put you on an ambulance, right in the ambulance, and I got flown to England, and I stayed there for 54 days. And that was, that's about the gist of it. I mean, but I know with the spoon, one time they opened the boxcars, and the German guards went up on top, and they had soup, big buckets of soup. Now, what are you going to put it in? Dishes? No, but you got a helmet. So you used the helmet, but you had also used that helmet when you had diarrhea. And what could you do? I got some snow, I scooped it out to wash everybody. I wasn't the only one with that brilliant idea. But you had your soup, and I had a spoon. I mean, you get flashbacks once in a while of things like that, but I know I can't see, like my grandchildren, my granddaughter who took the bread, she ate the insides, and she left all the crust. That's all children do in America anyway. And my wife cooks, so I clear off the table, but I couldn't throw that bread away. I thought you would leave it for the birds or something like that, but I just couldn't do that.
When did you return home?
When? Oh, sometime around May, I think.
Were you in hospitals up until then?
Yeah, I was taken right into Halloran Hospital from St. Albans. We landed, I came home on a plane. I later found out that, I mean, not this, be bragging about it, only the worst cases came back that way. And they came back by plane to St. Albans. I landed in whatever field that is over there. And I was taken to Halloran Hospital in Staten Island. And I stayed there. They try to fatten you up, so to speak. And it was pretty good. By that time I was in, half decent shape. I was up to around 110 pounds. You had unlimited privileges for the kitchen. And so after a while we got a pass to go home. And I came back and maybe 12 midnight or something like that. You could go into the kitchen and eat. You had a different kind of chart. They didn't care what you ate. So but I'm here to talk about it. That's the best part of it,
How do you think your military service affected your life?
Oh, it did. I didn't become so wasteful. I remember as a child, my mother, father would say, at that time there was a war with the Chinese and Japanese were fighting. And she says, there's some child over there in China, finish his spinach, And everybody goes through that, but when you have a follow-up with it like that, where you're actually deprived as a young adult, we don't waste. That's just about it. Just don't waste anything, and that's the main thing.
Did you bring any pictures or anything?
No, I didn't really have any pictures.
All right. All right, well, thank you very much for your interview.
Oh, nice. Thank you, fellas, for the trouble.